Good morning. Happy Sabbath, church. We are very thankful that everyone is here, hopefully safe, not sick, despite the cold weather this past week. We are continuing or doing our second part of our Faith Talk series. And if this is new to you or you were not here before when we did this, basically this is the time where I share the podium with a friend of mine or a guest speaker, and we just kind of do an interview style kind of sermon. So it's a little different. 2 weeks ago, we had Jason Daniel come, and today I have a really good friend of mine here to join us for our second edition of Faith Talk. So Kenneth and hi, Kenneth.
Hi.
Let's welcome Kenneth. Say hello. All right. Okay. Welcome.
Hello.
So Kenneth and I have we've known each other for quite some time now, yeah?
Quite a few years.
Yeah, quite a few years. We have some pictures to just kind of throw you back to the good old days, right? So this first picture is, I think it's probably one of the first times we've interacted, right?
Well, we have to see the picture.
Oh, yeah, let's see the picture.
I think so.
All right, so this is one of the first instances where we met. Not the guy on the nor that guy. The other guy, obviously that's Kenneth. This was 2016. So this was before you went off to, you were part of International Kayam,
Yeah.
and you were going to Bolivia?
Yeah.
Well, before he
Good
went off to
memory.
Bolivia.
Good memory.
Oh yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
So this was, I was not his like batch leader or like teacher, but I was helping with the other Kayams at that time. But this is where we first like talked.
I don't remember talking.
Oh, we didn't talk.
I think
We just took a picture together. But this is one of the first instances. But since this time, we've developed a friendship and we've gotten to know each other. We were looking through pictures last night, trying to kind of retrace the history of Kenneth and myself. This is in 2018. If you notice, we're like different glasses every time in the same year, and then to no glasses by the end of the year. So yeah, it's like beginning of the year, middle of the year, and then end of the year, right? And so I don't, first picture, this was like LEC parking lot. You carrying like 4 water bottles for some reason. There was like some concert or something.
I drink a lot of water.
Yeah, lots of water. The middle one is when we were a part of Mexico. That's Mexico Kayam, right? It was like a Sabbath on Mexico Kayam for the high schoolers. And then the last one is before you went off to seminary. Really random. So we'll talk a little bit more about how this doctor went to seminary. But yeah, we were there. And our friendship now. I don't know when this was, but
That was the rummage sale at Glendale.
oh yeah, he's basically honorary Glendale member. He comes to our church more than he goes to his home church. Oh, sorry. People online see this. And then the other picture, he said it was a nice picture of us, so he wanted to show everyone that one. I didn't want to show that one, but so that's Kenneth and I. So we used to have when I was at La Sierra, he took a class. It was like Oregon or something. Your random class.
I did take organ lessons,
Yeah.
but I took biochem.
Oh. So he didn't tell me that. But we used to have something called breakfast club. So we would like eat breakfast together at La Sierra cafeteria. And so we've had a lot of deep, meaningful conversations. And I think one of the reasons why I wanted to bring Kenneth, even though we've invited him before to share kind of his story, is because Kenneth and I feel like I can have very meaningful conversations about life, about church, and about just Christianity. And so today, in particular, we're going to be talking a little bit about this idea of calling, as John mentioned in the beginning. And I think it's a question that many of us, we have a tendency to ask at one point or another in our lives, right? We want to know, what is God calling me to do? Like, if you are a Christian, then that is a question that comes up at one point or another, right? You may wonder, like, what do my parents want me to do? Or, like, what do I want to do? But as a Christian, you will eventually come to the question of, what does God want me to do, right? But I believe when we ask that question, we're asking it the wrong way, right? In fact, I believe when you look at Scripture, when you look at the Bible, you'll see that calling has less to do with what we do and a lot more with whom we are with. Okay? In other words, the main point, and this is the main point that we're going to be looking at today in our message, is before God calls you to a position, God is calling you to himself. Can we actually just read this all together on three? 1, 2, 3. Before God calls you to a position, he calls you to himself. This is what we want to talk about today in our conversation. And so we'll break it down a little bit as we go. When we talk about calling, most of the times it's about career, right? Your major, your life choices, and things like that. We think, what does God want me to do? But like I said, Scripture shows us that God is calling us to himself before the position, right? And in other words, calling becomes this very multi-dimensional thing, right? Calling is not just a one-sided, one-faceted type of thing. It's multi-dimensional. And oftentimes, before we are given a task in the Christian walk, we have to start with relationship, okay? So in other words, as you see here, calling is multi-dimensional, and the first layer is always what? Relational, right? The first layer is always relational, okay? So before we actually go into Kenneth's story, I wanted to kind of give you guys like the spiritual background, kind of the theological like reasoning why we kind of believe in this, and then we'll kind of use your story as kind of the, I guess the template or the case study of exactly this, right? Now, ready? This is very like lecture-like, okay? So we get this idea of calling being multi-dimensional, looking at the biblical words for calling, okay? So there's 4 different connotations, and I've actually shared this with you guys before. So if you have good memory, then you'll remember that I've actually talked about this. If you're new, then this is new. Or if you were here in the past 3 years and don't remember this, then a refresher, okay? So the first connotation comes from the Hebrew word kara. Okay, can we say it together? Kara. Very good, okay? And it's this ideal of calling out to someone. So like, for example, can you give us an example?
Hey, Tim.
Oh, hey, Kenneth, right?
Hey.
So it's a calling out to somebody. Easy, right? That's the first connotation. Second connotation that we see is to name, okay? So an example would be,
Tim.
oh, that is my name, right? Like, oh, like this flower is going to be named, I don't know.
A rose.
Oh, this is a rose, right? So this is the action to name, okay? And that is the second connotation that we find in Scripture when it comes to calling. We fast forward to the New Testament, and there are 2 more connotations. The third connotation is found in the Greek word kaleo. Can we say that together?
Kaleo.
All right, very good. And kaleo is about an invitation. It's a call to receive, okay? Yes. So, for example, like Jesus calling out to people, and we're going to look at that a little bit later, but it's this idea of calling people to himself. And then
Inviting people to church.
Oh, yeah, like inviting people to church. To events, right? If you are inviting someone to Friendsgiving, like, wow, like you are being kaleoed, right? That's terrible Greek, but you're being kaleoed. If you're coming to this church for the first time, you were invited by somebody, that's the connotation, okay? And then the final connotation is the response to the calling, okay? And this is found very much in the early church. So when you look at the early church and you see kind of the response that the people take to the calling that they are given, that's where we get the fourth connotation, okay? So it's a response. It's not just hearing the call, it's about how do you respond to that, okay? So that's the 4 different connotations. But if we look at just the third and fourth connotation, you can see already, or even just looking at all 4, you see the multidimensional reality of what calling is, right? Calling has so many different layers, and the reality is, for us as Christians, is there are 2 callings. There's 2 layers. There's a first calling and a second calling, okay? And we're going to summarize it like this. Before we are called to something, we are called to someone. Before being called to do, we are called to be. Can we read this all together? On 3, 1, 2, 3. Before we are called to something, we are called to someone. before being called to do, we are called to be. Okay, a little bit of a tongue twister, but it's a very easy way to remember the multi-dimensional layers that we find in calling, particularly in biblical calling. Are we following? This pretty straightforward, right? Okay, so before we dive into our conversation, I want to highlight a little bit of Kenneth's journey. He's going to talk a little bit more about it, but if you know Kenneth or if you've heard his story, and as he'll share a little bit more, his story is not very straight line resume, right? In the sense of like, it's not very like, oh, I did this, done, right? It's very like, if you look at it from a bird's eye view, you would say there are a lot of detours, right?
Very circuitous.
Very what?
Circuitous.
That word, right? Very
Roundabout.
Roundabout, yes. He's trying to show off his SAT vocab that I don't know, okay? But from a bird's eye view, you may assume that his life is very random. But I think, honestly, like, that is the point of biblical calling, right? It's the point of biblical calling in the sense that calling is never about, like, a career choice. Rather, it's a relationship with God that carries you through different seasons of life. I'll say that one more time. So just think about what I just said. His life is a testimony to the fact that your calling is not particularly a career choice, but it is a relationship with God that carries you through all seasons of life. Let that marinate for a second. Yeah. I just want to be very clear, though. For some of you that already have a career or like have something like kind of set in life, and maybe you're thinking like, well, I just kind of went through the system and like I have a calling. Like, are you saying that's not valid? No, not necessarily. I think it's important that if you had one career in your entire life, that like we're not trying to say that you're not following God's calling. I'm not saying that whatsoever. The point is that your calling in whatever you do is relational, right? And so as relationship deepens, what happens is God, he opens up doors and opportunities in his timing. And Kenneth's story, I think, really shows us that reality. That he wasn't called necessarily to a job or an occupation or a position. He was first called to Jesus, and then everything else flowed out of that, right? Okay. So in other words, our calling unfolds as you walk with Jesus, right? So, I realize I didn't give you a time to introduce yourself. Does everyone know Kenneth for the most part?
I've been here a few times.
Oh, yeah. More time. Oh, sorry. So, Kenneth, do you want to just briefly maybe introduce yourself, and then maybe we'll go into some of the questions that we have for you today.
I'm Kenneth Choi. I am currently at Loma Linda University. Actually, no, I'm not at university. I'm at Loma Linda Hospital, University Hospital, and I'm a resident in pediatrics right now. And I think I've seen a lot of you before because I've been here a few times, but it's good to see you all. And I grew up in LA, San Gabriel, and been around the area, been to a few other places as well. Went to Andrews for college and grad school as well, and then Loma Linda for med school.
So he's been around, and we'll hear a little bit more of your story as we go. Okay. Anything else you want to share?
Oh, yes. Thank you for the invitation.
Oh, we're glad you're here.
Yeah, we've been good friends for a while, and so it's always good to hang out and see Tim and Grace. And I would say, commenting on the picture from earlier. So I said we didn't really talk. It's like we met at that time, and then I saw you at GYC that winter in that year. I made a cameo on his vlog. You can check that out on
don't check it
YouTube. And then after that, I feel like we just kept running into each other at different places. And at this point, it's like I can just go to any random event and I know I'll see you there.
I don't know if that's a good thing, but okay. Yeah, but we really do just like run into each other in a lot of things. Yeah. We're similar age, and so we have a lot, like we get along quite a bit in that sense. We grew up in the same generation, and so some of you young people don't understand, but like no, like we have our own thing.
Yeah, the boomers.
Yeah, we're the no, we're that's rude to everyone else. Okay, all right. So let's go ahead and let's dive into the conversation now, and we'll kind of pull apart kind of his testimony and his story. But the first question that I want to ask you today is, when did walking with God begin to shape the direction of your life?
I grew up in church, probably similar to a lot of people here. So for that situation, I feel like you don't always realize the answer to this question when you started walking with God, because there's a point where you're going to church because your family is going to church and you go with your family, and then there's another point where you decide that you want to go because you want to go, right? And I think for me it was around like the later time of high school, that time period where I don't know if there's any high schoolers here, or maybe there are a few, but everyone remembers studying for the SAT, and, or maybe not, but, but, preparing for college and just feeling really stressed. I think the first time I felt a lot of stress was as a junior in high school. I don't know about you.
Because of SAT.
Because of SAT.
I see.
And, it sounds funny thinking back on it now because it's like, oh, it's just a test. But, things seem different in retrospect.
Mm.
Right? So around that time, I was feeling very overwhelmed with a lot of things and feeling like I was at the end of myself. And, I think oftentimes we've all experienced this before too. It's like you do everything that you're trying to do. You feel like you're doing everything properly,
Right.
but you still feel like you're not getting anywhere. And I remember experiencing that as a young high schooler.
Yeah.
And at that time, I remember talking to my pastor and saying, I've been going to church my whole life. I feel like I know the Bible decently well, but I feel like something's missing. And then they suggested to me, they were like, have you ever read the Bible to like meet Jesus on your own? I was like, well, yeah, I think I do that every time. And then I thought about that more, and I was like, no, I don't think I've actually intentionally just spent time to get to know God. And at that time, I realized that even though I knew who God was, I didn't have that relationship that I really wanted. And it was from coming to that point where I was just feeling low and, like I said, at the end of myself, where I realized that I needed this relationship with God.
Right.
And that led to starting my devotions, reading the Bible, journaling, and enjoying nature while doing it. I think for me that's a big part of spending time with God. It's like music, of course, but it's like I can have my Bible and a notebook, and I'll be inside, and then my mind is just like zoning out. But then if I am sitting somewhere where like I can see the sky, it's just like it's a whole different experience.
Got it. So it sounds like for you, I guess in high school or late high school is when kind of this realization or this kind of like, oh, maybe I need to shift my attitude towards the things that I grew up doing. So like maybe many of us here grew up going to church, reading the Bible for the sake of reading the Bible, doing devotions because parents are like, we need to sit around the table, do devotion, whatever. But your attitude towards that changed. No longer was it kind of this, I just have to do it for the sake of doing it, but is more of this, I guess, how can I get to better know this God that I come and worship? So that was kind of like that turning point for you. So in other words, you started to see, or the direction of your life started to change because your attitude towards God changed. No longer was it for the sake of just doing it, but because you wanted to have a relationship with God.
Exactly. It's like seeing your friends.
Yeah.
You don't see your friends because you have to.
Yes.
If you did, then
That's
they're not.
terrible friendship.
Yeah, that's not really.
That's not a
that's
friendship,
they're
right?
not really your friend then.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
But you see them because you want to,
Right.
and that's sort of the shift in mindset that I had.
Got it. Sounds good, right? Yeah, I like that. Okay, so in terms of, I guess, a teaching point that we can kind of take from that, unless there's anything else you wanted to add. No? I think one thing that we can take away from this is that calling begins with responding to God's invitation to relationship, not necessarily in selecting a career path. Can we read this together on 3? 1, 2, 3. Calling begins with responding to God's invitation to relationship, not in selecting a career path. Yeah, I like that. I think that's a really good way to think about calling. The first step would be to responding to God's invitation to relationship, like Kenneth did in high school, the early stage of high school, or late stages of high school. All right. Anything else you want to add to that?
I guess just to clarify, do you think that calling is about just the relationship, or that's part of the equation?
Well, definitely a part of it. I think if we're running with our kind of definition of what calling is and it being multidimensional, I think it's not the only thing, but it is definitely like the first step that you should take is that building that relationship. Not to say, once again, that you can't figure out the relationship part later. Of course, there's people that maybe go down the route of selecting the career first and then maybe finding a relationship with God. But I think biblically, when we look at it, the imperative starts with the relationship, and then your calling or your doing makes a lot more sense after that. So, yeah, definitely not the only thing. It's definitely both, I think. It's necessary.
It's just like the steps. It's like
Yeah,
one
yeah.
should come before the other.
Should, yeah.
Should.
Biblically,
Biblically.
yes, absolutely.
Sometimes doesn't, but
Doesn't,
that's
but
okay.
it's okay. We following? All right, very good. Okay. Shall we go to the next question? All right, so the next question is, how has following Jesus before knowing your actual destination led you into the callings, and I put that in plural intentionally, that you've walked into?
I don't think I've heard this in plural before.
Sorry. Go ahead. What do you think?
What are your callings?
No, in the sense of, I guess, maybe we should have quote unquote callings.
No, I'm just giving you a hard time.
Okay, go ahead.
Just being technical here. I think before knowing the destination, I don't think any of us really know our own destination. It's like, even you can ask the older generation too. It's like, I mean, maybe the older generation knew a little bit more because there's a little bit of less switching.
Like less variables and
it's like kind of, you start something and then you kind
you
of
have no choice.
Yeah.
You must finish kind of mentality. Yeah.
But I mean, anyway, I don't think any of us, my point is just in general, I don't think any of us really know the destination of where we're going to end up. It's like if you think about right now and think about where you were 5 years ago, think about that time. What day is today? November 22.
22nd.
What year is it?
Okay. What is it? 2025?
Okay, think 2020, okay, November, COVID, what you were doing on this day. And can you think, like, in that time frame, if you had to think, where will I be 5 years from now? You've heard this question. It's like, where will I be 5 years from
10
now?
years,
10
5
years
years,
from
yeah,
now.
yeah.
And then people have these extravagant answers, but it's like,
Really?
How often is that? It's like, is that true? And you don't really know. So, in general, I feel like a lot of the times you can kind of generally know the direction you want to go, but the destination, I feel like it's usually unclear, and that's part of the journey because we can't tell the future.
Right.
And for me, I feel like it's been that that has been true for me.
Yeah. No.
For me, going into, I was an education major in college, and I didn't know what that was going to lead to. I was a high school science education major, and I did student teaching for a semester, and then I taught for a year in Korea, and then, that was sort of me walking into something that I didn't know
Right.
what I was walking into. Even that whole going into education, I did it because I wanted to go into administration. I wanted to become a principal.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Not actually like teacher.
Exactly,
No, I
but
see.
you can't really do that without
teaching.
teaching. So it's like kind of going through the steps, and then realizing that I got to Korea because there was a lot of things. I wanted to live in Korea, connect with my roots, with the motherland.
Yeah.
Become more
Korean.
Korean.
Yeah, yeah.
I think I did.
No, definitely. Yeah, you definitely. When you came back, you were. Wait, did I even know you then?
Yeah, you did.
Oh, yeah, yeah, I did know you. Yeah, you're definitely more Korean for sure.
Yeah.
Like texting me in Korean for no reason. Things like that. But
We should do that again.
no. Okay, go ahead.
So me going to Korea, it's like I thought I knew what I wanted, and I get to Korea, and I remember the excitement of getting there, the first few weeks, first few months, going and eating like kimbap on the streets and tteokbokki and all these things that you see on the dramas. It's just that's your life now.
Yeah,
It's like I'm living the dream,
Yeah.
And then it's like I was also living in the countryside in the middle of nowhere where the nearest subway station was a 45-minute walk away from where I was staying, and the bus only came by every 3 hours. And so it was like, if you would walk from the place I was staying to the subway station, you could walk that whole time without seeing anybody sometimes.
Really? Wow.
Yeah. Sometimes you see some neighborhood harmonies.
Yeah, yeah, just
who
like
are just
doing a stroll.
yeah, or like working in the in their
Fields.
field.
Yeah.
Anyway, so then after getting there, a few weeks or months, I remember just feeling excited, and then time passes, and I'm like, what am I doing here?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so I've had that experience, like, you don't know what you're really getting into, and then you think you're going where you're supposed to be
Yeah.
going, and then at a certain point you're like,
It's like what's going on?
what am I doing here?
Yeah.
How did I end up here? Why am I here?
So it's kind
All
of
these questions
yeah,
start
I guess
flooding your head.
it's kind of I guess the question is a little flawed in that sense that it seems like following Jesus means, especially when you develop a relationship and you answer that calling into a relationship with him, it kind of means that it's going to be a lot of unknown. Like there's going to be a lot of uncertainty, a lot of confusion, right? Kind of in that journey. And this is actually the reason why we kind of selected Mark 1 as our scripture reading today. But if you look on the screen, or if you want to open your Bibles, this is the NIV version. But this is basically where Jesus calls the disciples to himself, right? Jesus walked beside the Sea of Galilee. He saw Simon, his brother Andrew, casting a net into the lake, for they were fishermen, right? So this is clearly their occupation. This is their, quote unquote, their calling in life, right, before meeting Jesus. And then Jesus says to them, what does he say? He says, come, follow me. And then what does he say? And I will send you out to fish for people, right? And they left their nets and they followed him, right? It's a very simple, like, grammatical thing when you look at it, but it's very clear that the imperative started with what? Come, follow me is
The invitation.
It's an invitation, right? It's a very relational thing. And then their action or their doing or what they're, basically what we understand as calling nowadays, I'll send you out to fish for people. That's the calling, right? So it starts with this invitation into relationship and then going out to fish for people. I can almost guarantee you, like if we think about the disciples, when Jesus said this, do you think they fully understood what Jesus was talking about?
Unlikely.
Yeah, very unlikely, right? Fish for people, that sounds like very cannibal-like, right? That sounds wrong, right?
It does. I mean, he didn't provide context.
No, there's no, think about this, you guys. Like, if some guy came up to you and you were a fisherman and was like, hey, you're going to go fish for people now. Like, what? Is this
Mhm.
guy like human trafficker? Like what? Right? It sounds very odd if you really think about it. And like if another thing that if you just think about the story of the disciples, think of the narrative of the disciples, like how they spent time with Jesus, right? They didn't go out and start like creating the early church as soon as they met Jesus. They spent 3.5 years, right? Spending time with Jesus, getting to know Jesus, building a relationship with Jesus, right? And then in doing so, they were given their calling at the end of Jesus' life, right? The Great Commission.
They didn't really know what they were getting into.
Yeah,
at
they
the
had
time.
no clue, like
Mhm.
no context whatsoever, right? Same thing, Zebedee or James, John, sons of Zebedee, right? So it's kind of this very interesting thing. The calling, this conundrum is calling, following Jesus or having this calling to God does not necessarily, I guess, equate to fully understanding what the destination is, right?
Mhm.
As maybe as frustrating as that might sound, I think it's pretty clear biblically that calling is more about knowing the destination, but more about the relationship with God, right? So, I guess the teaching point, and just a reiteration of basically what we're talking about, is that we are called into relationship before we are called into responsibility. And so, for in your life, right? I mean, obviously, you're not a principal at a school right now.
Not as far as I'm aware.
Yeah, he's in Loma Linda, hanging out with children, right? As a doctor. Sorry, let me clarify that. Right? Hanging out with children as a doctor, right? It's a completely different path that he would have imagined himself in the beginning, but I think that's very true to this statement of he was called into a relationship with God, and then as that developed, his
There's,
responsibility
there's
became
some overlap though, because
okay.
I was in education with, for high schoolers.
Oh,
and
so you're
then,
teaching kids.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
It's crazy. So when you look in hindsight, that's kind of the crazy thing, right?
Yeah.
You start to see these connections of how your relationship with God kind of flourished into an understanding of what has God called you to do in this life.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Nice. Okay.
Oh, and then I just thought of this too.
Mm.
But the whole calling aspect, it's like if you are called to something, someone has to call you.
Oh, that's a good point.
I don't think we think about,
Yeah.
when we think about calling, we think about ourselves most of the time.
Like,
What
yeah.
is my calling?
Yeah, yeah.
But then the other half is, who is the one who called you?
Ooh.
It's like, let's say your phone rings, you get a call, you're like, oh, I got a call. But it's like,
But who called you?
exactly.
Oh.
That always comes up in conversation. If you get a phone call, you're with someone, you
Yeah.
answer the phone, you hang up, and they're like, oh,
Who
who
called
was
you?
that?
Who was?
Right?
They don't. Yeah. Usually, it's not like, what was the contents of your conversation?
Right.
That's weird, right? Yeah.
I mean, some people.
I'm not like that. So yeah, I think that's a really good point. Is we have to understand when it comes to calling, that's also multidimensional, right? Who is giving you that calling? And so it's almost like you bypass. What's that saying? It's like, don't shoot the messenger, right? I don't know if it has anything to do with it, but that's the first thing that came to mind. But it's this ideal, right, of like somebody must have sent that message, and
Yeah.
so if you just focus on the message and neglect the message giver, right, then you're missing the point of like the calling as well.
I see what you're saying. You're like, they're not the messenger, but they're the messenger.
Yeah, whatever that means. Okay. All right, very good. Okay, let's go into our last question now, if that's okay. And this is more of kind of just the practical side of calling. And I think maybe this is something you can expand on a little bit. But what has worked for you when it comes to living out God's call in your everyday life? So obviously, like, you're a doctor, but you're a man of many talents. Many talents, right? You're a musician, you're a funny guy, like, yeah, a lot of talents, right? You're my friend, right? That's not a talent,
That's the
but
best one.
Okay, anyways. So, so how does that work for you? Like, what keeps you in the church? Like, what is it about your calling to God, like relationally, that helps you kind of live it out in every aspect of your life? Not just in being a doctor, but just like being a part of the church, or in your friendships or in your music or in your YouTube channel? Like, how does that like play out, or what has worked for you?
It's definitely easy to get lost in everything that's going on.
Mm.
So I will say, even having this conversation here is a good reminder that it's a mindset that we have to have. It's constantly reminding yourself of this relationship that you have, because a lot of the times we get caught up with, what am I doing? It's like, do this, do that, do this, do that. We get focused on, you've heard of like the tasks-oriented mindset versus like relationship-oriented. And even in a field like medicine, where you're interacting with people all the time, it's easy for that to become something like,
You forget the person or the patient
Yeah.
or whoever you're seeing. You
Just
get caught
like,
up in the
they have this problem, give them this.
yeah.
I mean, in any relational work too, even like teaching or pastoring too,
Mm.
it's probably, that can happen
Yeah.
where you get into that, unknowingly, right?
Mm. Mm.
So I would say refreshing your mindset, and how I do that, practically speaking, I kind of mentioned it earlier, but I think nature really helps me a lot.
Mm-hmm.
It's like the combination, because you know how people say, if you're going to do devotions, it's helpful to have your spot. You heard that before?
Yeah.
Some people say it's like a room in their house.
Yeah, like a quiet
or
space.
or a chair.
Right.
Or it's just like a certain setting, environment that they
Mhm.
create for themselves, like their car while they're driving to
Mm.
work.
Yeah.
For me, I feel like it's just when I can be outdoors,
Yeah.
and that really helps me to remember. Another thing too is, I don't do this all the time, but once in a while,
Mm.
I do try to ask myself, kind of go through a checklist of people that I know and say, who out of people that I know or that I've interacted with recently is God giving me an opportunity to kind of connect with?
Mm.
I don't write out a list.
Right. You mental like
Mhm.
kind of.
Mhm.
So how does that help you? Or maybe not how does it help you, but why does that? Because I'm assuming you're saying that because it helps you to remind yourself of kind of like the focus on like a relationship with God. But
Mhm.
what's the connection? Unless I missed it, but
Yeah, so I think this is sort of the second layer of the call, right? It's like,
the doing part, right?
yeah, because the first part is the call to the relationship, and then
Mm.
there's a call to do
Mhm.
afterwards. Because like, Jesus called the disciples and then
Right.
made them into fishers of men. So
Mm.
this is like that part, I feel like, is, I wouldn't say this is, maybe this is sort of what is referred to as discipling,
Mm.
but in a way it's just entering into community,
Mm.
in a Christian community with other people. That's one thing. Another thing I also try is, in the hospital setting, I don't offer prayer for every patient, but once in a while, I try to get a sense of who may need it. It's like, obviously everyone can use prayer, but it's not a part of my routine thing that it's like, I ask every person I meet.
Right.
But, people who seem to, I'd be connecting better with, and I find out that they're religious, and kind of just even realizing that, it's like asking God to help me realize who it would be a good idea to offer prayer for.
Right.
Funny story, because like I said, I don't routinely offer prayer, but the first time I ever offered prayer, it was sort of something I was just trying out, and I didn't really know what to expect, and the parents, they were. I couldn't tell if they were how receptive they were going to be to prayer at first. They were just normal individuals.
Right.
But once I started praying, it's like, I kind of peaked while praying, and they were like, very earnestly, bowed, and they were also praying along while I was praying, and then I could, hear the quiver in their voice and the tears. I saw tears coming down their face, and after that, I was like, that was incredible.
Right.
God allowed me to connect with someone in that way, but it was sort of a preview, I feel like, because that was just the first time, and that didn't really happen again after that, like that.
Got it. Yeah.
But just being in that mindset, like asking God, who do you have that I can interact with? Is a practice that I try to get into.
Yeah. So it's kind of this notion of, like, it's important for you not only to receive that calling into relationship, but how do you play that out into your life? And so the stronger it sounds like you build your relationship with God, it sounds like the next step to that is, like, now that I have this relationship with you, God, how do I live this calling out? Right. Essentially is what you're trying to say. That's beautiful. Yeah.
Amen. It's like inviting other people
into that same relationship.
Yeah, into that.
Yeah. Oh, that's why you said it's kind of like discipleship almost.
Yeah.
I see. That sounds like a different hole we could go down.
Yeah.
But I think there's scripture that kind of almost, we were talking about this last night and we kind of liked it. And I don't know, maybe it won't hit the same way or resonate the same way. But Ephesians 4:1-3, or that at least that first part says, as a prisoner for the Lord, this is Paul speaking. He says, I urge you to live a life worthy of the calling you received. If we just replace that word calling, this is the same kaleo that we find in the New Testament. If we replace this word with the ideal of relationship, it reads, I urge you to live a life worthy of the relationship that you have with Jesus, that you have received. You are called to live a life that is worthy, right? In other words, you see kind of the two dimensions of a calling, right? Your relationship with God, and then how you live that out, right? Be completely humble and gentle, be patient, bearing with one another in love. I think these are all things that you obtain when you're in relationship with God. And so a calling, I wouldn't say a calling loses purpose when we don't share that or invite other people into that, but I think that's an important part of a calling that we have to include. Otherwise, we miss out on the full, I guess, beauty of what God's calling or biblical calling is in our lives. That's awesome. And it kind of like feeds into itself, right? Like you would say, like, the more you experience that, the more you kind of see how you can draw closer to God, and it just feeds into itself over and over and over again. Anything you want to add? You don't have to if you don't want to. I'm not trying to force you.
It puts less pressure on you, especially if you're trying to figure out a career, knowing that you could do anything really. I mean, not anything, but most things within reasonable means.
Yes.
And still do it for God. The important thing, I think, is to have that mindset, though, because then if you have that, you could do X or Y, and it doesn't exactly, you don't have to feel so much pressure like, oh, I have to do this or I have to do that. As long as you're doing it with God, then He will reveal your path for you as you go throughout it.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And I think that's for at least the young people here too that are trying to figure out their calling or figure out like kind of the journey and the path that they're going to be on. I think that's so important to always remember, right? It's not necessarily God in scripture says like, you're going to be a doctor, you're going to be a lawyer, you're going to be a dentist. Like the Bible never is explicit about that. It's more explicit about this ideal of having and developing this relationship with God. And so in essence, in anything that you do, you can answer the calling that God has in your life, the invitation to relationship, and then sharing of that relationship, taking action and living upon that. So I guess in other words, the teaching point that we can pull away from that is when your relationship with God grows, your calling in this life will have clarity, right? The more that you draw closer to God, the more clarity you'll have in the direction and the things that you find yourself doing. So definitely calling is not something that we figure out overnight. Obviously for you, it's been many years that you just kind of going around and figuring things out, but it all kind of intertwines and comes together when we look back at it. But it's clear that I think in your journey that God has definitely called you and unfolded and revealed to you more about Him and His purposes for your life, and you've just kind of lived that out in all that you do. So I just want to share with you guys just Matthew 6:33, just as a final reminder. But to seek first His kingdom and His righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well. I think there's so much truth to this. We read this, we talk about this all the time, but there's so much depth to this ideal that when we first seek God, when we really seek that calling into a relationship with Him, then really things do work out. And like I think Kenneth's life is a true testimony to that. I'm sure if you ask any of the people here in this church that maybe have a journey of finding their career or their calling, I think they would also, share maybe something similar along the lines of this. But yeah, I think this was a good conversation. But once again, reiterating that main point that before God calls you to anything, God will call you to Himself.